So we're going to look at all the different steps. There's really 5 main steps. It's not a really difficult process, and some of you who have done migrations from Exchange 2010 or 2007 to 2010 before, almost exactly the same process into 2013. So you'll be really familiar with this piece. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through these steps piece by piece, and I'll do them on our server, the test that I've got set up, and then afterwards we'll have some time for questions and answers, and we will do that. So first step in setting the archive system up to integrate with Exchange 2013, and usually I say the best way to have this ready to go and do your testing is to migrate a couple of mailboxes over to Exchange 2013 first, and then once you've got a couple of mailboxes you can play with in 2013, you go into the archive manager system, get the synchronization set up. And the first step to that is, of course, assigning permissions in Exchange 2013. So we need to assign super user permissions in 2013 to be able to go in and archive and retrieve and restore. So I'm going to flip over to my archive manager system here, my little test server. And hopefully you guys can see that all right. And down here, this is obviously our archive server, and down here I've got our Exchange 2010 and 2013 servers. Not really going to need to delve into 2010. We've just got some mailboxes there. I've already pre-moved a bunch of them over to Exchange 2013 and haven't told the archive system that that's happened. So we'll want to take a look at that. I'm going to go into 2013, and of course we're going to have a PowerShell window, and we are going to happily have our little script I've already written out and put into place. A bunch of you guys have seen this before, the permission script. And get mailbox database, it adds AD permissions for our super user. In this case it's mam admin, and super user can be anything that was assigned to your system server _exchange, or cadmin for some of you you older users who've been using the system for a long time, since the Sunbelt days. And you'll see that the rights that we need to add are send as, receive as, and MS Exchange store admin. There's been some question as to whether send as and receive as is part of full control in Exchange, and it actually isn't. It's specifically send as, it's a separate right, and if you give full control you won't necessarily have send as rights, so that trips people up sometimes. So I'm going to run this right now. Now I've already run this in this system, so it already has the permissions. So what you'll see is it's going to give me, for each database in the system, there's 3, it's going to give me an error message saying those permissions are already in place. That's fine. Typically what you would see is you would see a listing for each database, just like it is down here, without all the yellow gunk. Important to realize, the first thing that trips people up on this is that this script works on the database level. So it will work on all current databases in Exchange. That means later on down the road, you come along and you decide to add a new mailbox database into the system, and then you try to archive users off of it, and it says no and throws up a MAPI error. Most of the time it's because you need to run the script again with the new database in place in order to put the permissions on the new database. It won't automatically propagate to any new database you put in. So it's a good idea to actually keep that script around and keep it, marked down somewhere or in a little text file on the server for whatever you want to create a new database, if that's something you do a lot. So that's out of the way. Really simple stuff. We're going to flip back to our slide here. And our second piece, which of course is going to be importing the Exchange 2013 servers into the system. So Archive Manager, it doesn't know by default that you have these new servers in place, and it wants to take a look and be able to query them and do all the fun stuff that it likes to do with them. So we're going to switch back to our server here, and we're going to look at the archive server specifically. I'm going to fire up Enterprise Manager over here. Okay, so as most of you guys know, in Archive Manager, most things that are coming in and out of the system, new pieces that are being introduced or removed, come in through the Address Book Manager. So down up here in our little red book, Address Book Manager, some people get to it through here. Same thing. So we're going to open it up, and we're going to head over to the Servers tab. Right now, it's just looking at Exchange 2010, and it doesn't even know the existence of your new Exchange 2013 environment. Really simple stuff. We just want to right-click, hit Tasks, Add Server, and we're going to look for Exchange 2013 servers. Now, keep in mind, support for Exchange 2013 only started in, I believe you're looking at 5.3, version 5.3. If you're on one of the older versions, you click in here, you don't see Exchange 2013 at all. You're probably using an old version. You probably need to upgrade to get the support. So we're going to hit Next. It's going to come up with your default path. I'm going to click next to that. It's going to find your Exchange servers. In this case, Exchange 2013, we've got one server, all rules in place. That's our mailbox server, and that's specifically what we want. If you have a multi-role environment and you've got hub transport servers and client access servers, mailbox servers, all we're interested in here is the mailbox servers. We don't want to bother importing the hub transport servers, the client access servers, edge servers. We're not worried about those. We just want the mailbox server in this case. I'm going to add that in. Okay, so it's going to import the server. Processing finished. Close that up. And we're going to see it listed up here. Great. So the next steps we're going to want to do is, now that we know the server's there, we click down on mailboxes, and I've created these migration users for the presentation. Just going to open that up a little bit so we can see the column we really want, which is our home servers column. There we go. Open that up. So each mailbox is listed where that mailbox exists. These migration user mailboxes were all created in Exchange 2010, and I've since migrated, I believe, 4, 5, and 6 over to Exchange 2013, but the archive system has no way of knowing this yet. And that, of course, brings us to our next step in the system, which is verifying our Active Directory synchronization settings. This one's got a couple of steps, and we see a lot of people skipping this step and then trying to figure out why it won't connect. So that's something we definitely want to go over well. Okay, so we've got our users here. They're all still reading Exchange 2010. The system still thinks they're there. So what we're going to do is get out of Address Book Manager, or actually, we want to stay in Address Book Manager. My bad. We want to worry about synchronization. Now, Active Directory holds the keys to where those mailboxes are. Active Directory has a mark in it. It knows what Exchange server those mailboxes live on in the system. So the system here, our Archive Manager, has to query Active Directory to find out where they've moved. Now that it knows that this other server exists, it needs to do our synchronization. Now, you don't want to have to do this every single time you move a mailbox during a migration. So it's important to go in General Settings up here and check your automatic synchronization parameters. This is important for anyone who's using automatic groups that are keyed to a security group in Active Directory anyway, because it's the same query that goes in and says, this person's been added to the archive, this person's been removed from an archive group. But you want to go in Settings, and you want to make sure all these are clicked off, because very rarely would we come across a situation where we would want everything clicked off. And we're going to want to, importantly, go over to Scheduling. This is going to dictate how often the system checks Active Directory to see if anything's changed with your archived mailboxes. By default, you'll see if one of us go in and build a system, we'll typically do it 6 hours. We find it's got sort of the most, it's just sort of a good balance. Is every 6 hours it checks in Active Directory to see if anything changes and makes those changes accordingly. But during a migration, you might want to make that more often. You might want to make it every hour. You might want to make it every 2 or 3 hours, just because you're moving stuff back and forth a lot. And every time it does one of these checks, anything you've migrated from one server to another is automatically going to flip over. For now, I'll just mark it down for 6 hours. And of course, because you don't want to have to wait until one of the update intervals to actually move that stuff over. Let's say you move 100 mailboxes from one server to the other, and you want to right now get it switched over so it can start archiving properly. You can just click up in synchronization at any time, click Synchronize Address Book, check everything off, and hit Start. I'll do that right now. Let it do its thing. Okay. So that brings us to our next step, which is verifying home server changes in Address Book Manager. And the reason I bring this up as an extra step is because the first thing people do after they've done their synchronization, they say, okay, how do I know anything's changed? How do I know whether that's actually taken effect? So if we look back at Archive Manager, let me click down to the Mailboxes tab where we had these new users migration 1 through 6. Open it up again. Look at the home server. Now, interestingly, you'll see that they're all still marked on 2010 even after the synchronization. It's a little tiny thing that really trips people up a lot. Address Book Manager doesn't refresh automatically. So after you do the synchronization, you have to hit that refresh. And you'll see the ones that I've migrated over, which in this case 4 or 5, they've moved over to 2013. And you should see any, oh, and you'll also notice up here, this is the public folders in 2013 also appeared as it did the synchronization because it grabbed those. But you should be able to refresh the address book after your synchronization, see any mailbox that you've migrated from place to place should change home server and appear as a different one. Okay. So the last thing we want to take a look at, and by the way, that's pretty much the whole set. If you want to verify even further, you can always close this down and go view archive to your archive browser and just make sure. I haven't tried this in our set, and they're actually not in the group, so I'm just going to bring them up. Make sure that 4 or 5 capable of opening. Well, in this case, right. Okay, in this case, our MAPI profiles are acting up. We should actually talk about that a little bit. So your MAPI profiles, by default, will click in when you first reload the system. It's worth a reboot after the migration or just to restart your MAPI service. But we're going to go take a look and see what those MAPI profiles should look like. And of course, we could do an entire presentation on MAPI profiles alone. You guys know that. So we'll see that Exchange 2013 MAPI profiles have appeared here. This is our server, but what we really want to check is to make sure that those are actually running under the super user account. And oftentimes, they are not. Okay. In this case, they are. Take them off Exchange. Cached. Exchange 2013. Take them off cache. Make sure it's running under mam-admin, which it is. Okay, and make sure they can connect. All right, so system is set up, it's connected. What we want to talk about really quickly is client access server arrays. I know a number of you guys have them. With a client access server array, there's one change that needs to be made in here that's fairly important. Under the servers tab, if you've got a client access array, which I don't on this test server, but if you do and you have an external address that you need to add in, you need to make the extra step of coming in here to your mailbox server. And we don't want to, we still want the mailbox server to be in place here, but we want it to act kind of like Outlook does. When it builds these MAPI profiles, it builds them based on the name that's set in here in Address Book Manager under servers. So we want that name to reflect the path that Outlook or MAPI would take to get into the server. So in this case, if you've got an external array and you're trying to go straight to Exchange 2013, which is a mailbox server specifically, it won't work properly. It won't be able to get in. That doesn't have a client access role to accept it. So we're going to go in to properties, and I'm just going to pretend for a second that we have a client access array and the external address is mail.metalogics.com. And you see that we're only changing the name here, not the actual system, not the actual server. We're not bringing in a new server. And that will change to mail.metalogics.com. And for all the mailbox servers you've got, let's say you've got 5 mailbox servers and you've got 5 client access servers. You want to change all of the mailbox servers to read my mail.metalogics.com because you want the system to go in through that portal. I'm just going to change that back by actualizing it. If I actualize it, it says, oh, hey, that's not really the name, and drops it back to Exchange 2013. And then, after you've done that, you're going to have to go and probably, just check the profiles afterwards, the MAPI profiles, because what they should be reading, and they won't work on this system, because obviously we don't have a CAS array, but what should be reading is those Exchange 2013 profiles should actually be listed off as eprof_MAPI under prof mail.metalogics.com. The same down here, prof_mail.metalogics.com. And again, we can get kind of deeper into that, but that's sort of outside the scope of this particular quick take. So we can do a MAPI specific one later, and that would be plenty of content to get to. So I've hit my 15 minutes, a little bit over. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And if you guys want to drop some questions down in that question folder, I'm happy to answer them. Guys got anything for me? No questions at all? No, someone pop up there. Hang on. Yeah, just checking my Exchange account. Which is the best way to purge? What's the best way to purge mailboxes from a previous Exchange version? Well, I mean, that's kind of outside the scope of it. You mean if you're going to completely remove a mailbox from an older Exchange version rather than migrating it, the only way to purge a mailbox from the archive system is to actually remove all the archives. They would be completely gone. That actually means that you have to have every email in that box in the archive past its retention date, and you've got to mark it for delete, run a delete job, purge everything out. Then you can purge it from the archive system. But that doesn't really count for migration either. I mean, that works for anything. Okay, I'm just gonna switch to regarding CAS servers. Elaborate on which? I'm asking. On Daniel, elaborate on which specifically. So 2 CAS servers in a load balancer, same deal. As if you have 2 CAS servicers, if you've 2 CAS servers and you've got an external address for them, and you've got things going in through the external address, you want to do the exact same as we were talking about. So you want to actually go into into Address Book Manager, take all your mailbox servers. You want to right-click Properties and rename them to the name of that external address, mail.metalogics.com. Yeah, and you'll want to do that. You'll want to probably, it doesn't hurt to restart the MAPI service after that too, because sometimes restarting the MAM MAPI service, this guy right here, let me show you, is what recreates the MAPI profiles. And sometimes you might even have to go to MAPI profiles and delete them. You can do that, just wipe out your MAPI profiles and restart them. But this one right here, you can always restart that guy. And the next time you click on a mailbox, and by the way, whenever you're doing this, and again, we're slightly outside the scope, whenever you're doing this rebuilding of MAPI profiles, it helps if the first user you click on in Archive Manager is the super user, because that will lock that profile directly onto the super user account where you want. Okay. Remove existing Exchange 27. Oh, that's actually a really good question. Okay, so let's say I'm over here and I want to completely remove Exchange 2010 because I'm not using it anymore. I've decommissioned it. Once you've got all the mailboxes moved that you want to move, it's not a big deal. You can absolutely just go in here and purge it out. Now, that being said, we often tell you to leave it alone. And why is that? That's because you have a bunch of old mailboxes that are sitting in the system that have SQL tables with home server that says Exchange 2010, not 2013. It's possible in some kind of remote instances where that SQL table will be referred to, and if there's no reference in the Address Book Manager, it can cause issues. You're welcome to leave that server there. If you really need to, you can purge it, but if you took that Exchange 2010 server completely out of the equation and completely wiped it out, the only effect it would have is that in mailboxes here, when you tried to click on it, you couldn't get to it. If you clicked on Archive in the Archive browser, which is where you should be going for any old decommissioned mailbox that's no longer attached, that you can go in, you should still be able to access all those users, regardless of whether the original Exchange server is gone or not. And yeah, so I mean, to answer your question, John, it's a good idea to leave it. You can remove it, but it's a good idea to leave it just as a precaution. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay, anyone else? Or did I miss anybody? Just go up, see if I got all his questions. All right. There's Daniel. Editing manually the mapping profiles. Yeah, often we tend to edit the mapping profiles manually first anyway, because we kind of it's easier for us to manually do it, and then we make sure everything's in place. The downside to letting the MAPI service create it is, like I said, when you let the MAPI service create the MAPI profiles, it'll often hook that MAPI profile onto the first user you open. So if I open test user 1, it would automatically open test user 1 as that MAPI profile, and you'd only be able to archive test user 1. We need that MAPI profile keyed into the super user. So that's why we tell people that the first step they should do if they're letting the man MAPI services recreate the MAPI profiles to open the super user first. All right, is that all you guys got? I got six minutes left. 6 minutes left. You haven't drilled me yet. And I think it's probably actually not a bad idea to do one of these quick takes specifically on MAPI profiles, because MAPI profiles are fairly complicated and can go off the rails fairly easily, and just something that we deal with a lot with you guys, and especially during migrations like this, when you've got 2 different servers running across 2 different MAPI profiles, sometimes that can kind of be confusing. But we'll definitely think about that in the future as one of these. I think we had another question in there. Leah had a question. He wants to know what the next topic is. Well, actually, that's a good question. Well, we've got a couple of minutes here. What do you guys want to know? Because we're working on the next topic now. But if you guys have a good topic that you'd really like to talk about in our next session, just spit it out there in question, and I'll take a look at it, and we'll have a record of it, and we'll keep that in mind. MAPI, yep, MAPI's definitely a good one. Like I said, not bad at all. Best practices archive policies, another really good one. You're on a roll, John. Mark these down. Distributed environments, yep. And yeah, we are recording the entire thing, and we'll have it put together, and we'll get it up for you, Peter. And that'll be on our website in our knowledge base section, by the way. We'll have that up. Okay. So I've got best practice policies, MAPI, distributed environments. That's a good start for sure. Okay, last chance for any questions. I got 3 minutes. Okay, so I'll wrap it up. Thanks, guys, for showing up. Oh, one more, last second. HSMs in general would probably be a good one. I don't know if we can fit it all into 50 minutes, maybe split that into 2 multiple HSMs and moving HSMs and data out of one HSM to another. But definitely HSM management is a great one to cover. Can we include backups? What do you mean by that, Jovian, specifically? Can you elaborate on that? I mean, do you mean can we include backups in HSM, of HSM? Or maybe, I mean, just backing up HSM, period, and what's the best practices with that? What are the different ways to do it? Yeah, definitely, for sure. Okay, well, now we're kind of getting out of the scope. So, I'm gonna write down what we've got here, and you guys obviously are hungry for some questions, and you can always open up a case if you've got a lot of these specific questions you want to ask us. We're always happy to answer. But I'm going to wrap it up with this and put it down, and we will schedule the next one on one of these awesome topics. And yeah, I hope you guys this was informative, and I hope you got something from it. We're always anxious to educate people about the system and how to run it. I hope you got something out of it, and we'll talk to you in the next session.